Okay, folks, I want to thank you for listening, and some of you all have been tuning in to the Henderson Real News Show. And of course, the title is Organize, Don't Criticize. We are at the position in our lives now, ladies and gentlemen, that as far as black people are concerned in America, we are going to have to do something different. We must create what I call a new man, a new philosophy. We must look at our positions and the opportunities we have that we must change in order to get where we deserve to be as a human being. We must put less reliance on the Democrat and the Republican parties. We must look at building coalitions as black people. And that's what we are talking about today, ladies and gentlemen. We will be talking about 47.2 million black people that live in America and what they can do to move themselves back to position number one or number two in the economic and political order in America. Now we have just two of us here today. We have a special guest, Mr. Socrates Garrett. His business always is economic development. And since that's one of the most serious things black people have to do, we're going to talk about how the black people in America, and especially in the South, and later on you're going to see that the salvation plan for black people can start in the South. Again, we're going to show you that the South had us many years ago as slaves. We don't need to talk about that at all. They decided to work us without pay. They fought a civil war to keep us in slavery, and they lost. We moved all over the United States, moved to Canada and other places. And you will find today, ladies and gentlemen, that we are going to show you once again that it's best to organize versus criticizing the human enemies of mankind. And Mr. Socrates, as you know, we've been working together for a long time, and I'm pleased to have you today as the co-host of the Henderson Real News Show. And I want you just to think about what black people are doing in America, 47.2 million of, and what they are controlling and not controlling academically, politically, socially, religiously. And we are going to show the viewers and the listeners this evening that there is a simple solution to these problems that we face, and we won't have to be criticizing anyone. Because my thesis has been for years that when you criticize someone that's causing you harm and you don't do anything but criticize and pray, they appreciate you because they see you as a person that's weak. And when you're weak, you're not going to get any respect. You're going to be dealt with more harshly than you would if you were a fighter and an organizer. So, Mr. Socrates, I'm glad to have you here again today. And I want you to consider the fact that we never had this many people in America, black people, scattered all over the United States, where the research shows that black people in America can control over 75 major cities in America today if they would just organize themselves and stop criticizing others and doing other things. What is your opinion on that?
Well, Doc, I think that you and I have known that for quite some time now. You continually teach how blacks should control the areas where they are in the majority. And in many cases, especially in the South, as you point out, we are in the majority. And yet, we don't control anything. We don't control the economics. We don't control the social skills. We don't control the culture. We don't control education. And so black folk are consumers. And while you point out that we have the numbers, and we would probably have an economy over several $1 trillion, probably one said that we'd be the 17th largest nation in the world from wealth standpoint, we don't seem to be making any gains, Doc, with the economics.
Well, we are not making any gains, but that is something that can be changed within a short period of time, within the next 3 to 5 years. And my contention is that black people in America really don't have but 6 more years to make some major impact in the economic and political structure, and that's going to have to come through a new leadership. And if we get to the point where we allow ourselves not to become leaders under a new leadership, leaders that we train in our churches and community organizations, and not depend on others to put what I call leadership training programs together in government and what we call big-time community organizations and train the black leaders, that we will get worse and get lower on the pecking order. And our thesis today is that if black people control 5 areas of activity, from birth to death, in areas where they're the majority, they will win and get more respect and won't have to criticize anyone. People will be coming to black people, black leaders, black church people, black social developers, and asking and giving support and helping black people move to the point where they become dominant again. And instead of being number 2, black people can be the makers of policy for the majority group if they would strategically put themselves in positions of responsibility, economically, educationally, socially, and of course, in leadership.
No, Doc, and I agree with you. But since you say we only have 6 years, and when you and I were talking several years ago, you said we had 10 years. So
that's right.
I assume you said we've wasted away 4 of those.
We have wasted away 4. I put this together 10 years ago, and I looked at our strategy. And if we could get people on the local level, on the precinct level, where blacks are in the majority, to organize and do 3 things after they organize, that's pool their resources and their talents, and then build coalitions with other groups in the area where they are in a majority, and give them a little piece of the pie, but make sure they don't put them in responsibilities, give them responsibilities where they take the policy and how the money is going to be spent, that black people will rise again to the point where we can create communities. We don't have communities. We have neighborhoods. And that's what we're going to have to do in order to make things change, where the black population will see that there is progress for the next 300 years. If we don't do this in the next 6 years, we will be lower than number 10. Right now, we're number 10 in the economic and political order in America, and worse than that in Asia and Africa, especially in Africa. So
I was thinking, where do we see some examples of blacks controlling something? And I come back, and it takes me back a while. It takes me back to Maynard Jackson in Atlanta and what he was trying to do, and takes me back to Harold Washington in Chicago and what he was trying to do, and great leaders like that. I think Atlanta has produced more black millionaires and have a better economy for black folks than any other city.
That's true, and that was by design. And as you say, that started with Maynard Jackson because he was independent, and that's one of the things that blacks don't have as we speak in our country. We don't have enough black politicians that are economically independent. That's the problem. And we have others that are being appointed into positions or encouraged to run for positions, and economically they can't finance their positions, and they are financed by others. Therefore, that candidate is only black in color and not a black thinker, one that is not looking out for the interests of his people. He's usually going to look out for the interests of the people that's financing his campaign. And that's one of the problems where we can solve that problem. Research shows that if you train your own leaders and put them in positions of responsibility where you have selected the right candidate, put him in a position where he is trained by a real leader, and then he succeed him or her, you will have good government.
Well, we're going to try to understand why it is we don't get more done with the leaders that we have. Is there something that's causing us to lose ground and lose effective leadership? Are we offering up people that are unqualified, not capable of managing large budgets and all of the issues of a corporation? I mean, running a city or a county is a major enterprise. Running a school district is a large business. Are we putting the right people in these positions?
No, we're not. The fact shows, and you've been looking at the voting analysis here in Hinds County in Mississippi for some years. In certain areas, you have 18 to 30% of the registered voters voting in the state of Mississippi in local and state elections. Sometimes, of course, when they have a presidential election, you might have 30 to 40 or 50% voting. I'm talking about black votes. But if it's not a presidential election, the candidate that's going to do something for the area is usually not running. The candidate that's going to run is the incumbent that 25 or 30% put in office, and no matter what they do, that same vote is going to get them back in office. Now, they might do real bad, and they still won't lose. They will get enough to be in the runoff, and usually the incumbent will win the runoff if he or she has done halfway well.
So if one is an incumbent and been in office for a long period of time, meaning that he does not fear being unelected, that he knows that his job as long as he wants to, but yet he is not delivering anything back to the community of substance, has that individual been compromised?
Well, he has, and it's not his fault. That's just regular politics. When you are in a position where you don't have to be accountable and you're going to get paid every month, you have a base that loves you in most cases. When you don't have but about 1/4 of the people voting for you that's registered, that means 3/4 not voting for you that's registered. And then there are usually as many unregistered voters in your area than registered. So you don't have anything to worry about, because the same people that love you are going to vote for you whether you do anything or not, and criticize the government that they put in office and say they need to be doing more. The new person that comes in, that's organized, one that's trained by the so-called serious leaders in the community through their churches and institutions and community organizations, get these young people, and we got to start with young people, anywhere from 18 to 35 or 40. Those are the new leaders that I'm talking about. And those that are older than that, they need to be able to stay in their lane, retire, resign, or just say, this is my last election, because they are not going to see any significant changes, and they should feel bad. But it's not man's nature to feel bad when they don't make progress when they're getting paid.
Well, I don't hear or see anybody offering up to resign, so I think they're going to stay in those jobs as long as they can. Now, recently here in Jackson, we had a major shakeup in the Hinds County Board of Supervisors, and we have 3 new elected supervisors. Does that signal a change, and how should those 3 individuals see themselves?
Well, you asked me 2 questions. Is there a change? Yes. Will there be a change? Possibly not.
Well,
because you will find when you have 3 new people in office and you have 2 incumbents, usually about 90% of the time, one of those incumbents going to be the leader of the new people that were elected. My thesis is that if you're in a position where you outnumber the incumbents as new members, the new members ought to get together and select the president out of the new group, what I call the new men, and build coalitions with the current incumbents, and they'll do better, because if you have the current incumbent as your leader and you're the new person, you are going to be listening and trying to learn his or her style and not doing the research, looking at the budget, looking at the people who got the previous contracts, looking at your job description and demising and deciding what you're supposed to do. You're just going to do the same thing that's been done in the past. And it takes a bold politician to get in office for the first time and be in the majority and declare that I'm going to be the leader. You don't have a lot of Donald Trumps. O'Donnell started off as President of the United States, never been elected, and he walked in saying, I'm going to change America. We're going to be great again, and I'm going to make it happen.
Now, is Trump's style something that black people ought to emulate?
I guarantee you, most certainly.
Is that Republican philosophy something that black people ought to be concerned about?
Well, they shouldn't look at it as a party preference. Black people have always been in both parties, Republicans and Democrats. Any black person today that is aligned to either one of those parties, Republican or Democrat, is not a good citizen. You're supposed to vote regardless of party from the person you have negotiated with that's going to give you the most. So black ought to be in a position where their leadership will say, well, in position number 1 for a public service commissioner, since we're organized, we know who the new voters are, we are going to get together and we're going to put a person in office on the regional level. We're going to get us a new sheriff because we have 30 or 40% new voters that we have registered ourselves. And that new sheriff you get is that young person you have trained, that you have sent to college, for instance, or one that might have a law degree, or one that might have a degree in political science or business or accounting, and put those in those positions and pool your resources and allow them to run for office.
Now, Doc, I want to go to these 3 new people a bit, and because you're saying that the new people should elect one of them as the new leader.
Of course. That's the common sense thing to do if you want change in government and if you want new leadership. Well, it's not difficult, Mr. Socrates, I know where you're going, but it's not difficult to be in a responsible position if you're elected, because your job is already described on something called a job description. The supervisors, for instance, the supervisors have to look out for the interests of the people, economically, socially, politically, and nothing to do with religion. So that ain't got nothing to do with it. Look out for their general welfare, keep their roads up, deal with infrastructure issues, do fair allocations of funds. So you don't have to be an incumbent to do that. So if you get new leaders that's coming in as the majority, they should be smart enough to announce to the public that one of us will be the leader.
Well, 2 of the new leaders are women.
That doesn't make any difference.
We've never had that dynamics in the Hinds County Board of Supervisors.
Well, that might be a reason for a change.
And so if 2/3 of the new leadership is black women, then what's the chances of us having a black woman as president of the board?
It's very easily done if they vote that way. It can be done. You have 2 black women on the board and 3 black men.
Yes, you do. And one of those black men was newly elected.
That's right, exactly.
District 2 supervisor, Mr. What is his name? Thompson. Anthony was recently elected. So you got 3 new ones there and 2 women. But if one of those women were becoming president of that board, that would really send a signal through this political landscape.
That's right, to the people in Hinds County, on the local level, on the city level, and regionally throughout Mississippi and the South, that there is a potential for new leadership. And I guarantee you, there will be more females running for office, more than you can shake a stick at, and they will be winning positions of responsibility. Because all you need is an example of newness, those with new ideas, fresh ideas. In most cases, history will show that black female leaders and female leaders almost in any category usually do a little better than men when it comes to planning for the family, planning for the state, and planning for the nation. Look at all these foreign ministers that are females in Europe and other places, and many in Africa that are doing a great job because they are not real sensitive about gaining a lot of popularity. They look at their job descriptions and make things happen.
Well, I mean, we all thought that Hillary Clinton was going to break the glass ceiling and become the first female president of the U.S. That did not happen. And so women still have not broken through that glass ceiling, not at the Hinds County level, not at the president's level, and other places. Mississippi's never had a female governor. And so there are still some ceilings out here for women.
Well, those ceilings, sir, as you know, are self-made. Females outnumber the voters in the state of Mississippi and in most states. Females outnumber the voters in most county elections. So therefore, if you have the greatest number of voters, all you have to do is organize and stop criticizing the males. It's just that simple. The vote is there, but the leadership is not there. They are being submissive and being told by their husbands and friends and others, we prefer to have a male in charge. Women with the majority vote will say that is fine, but we prefer to be in charge for a change and just take over the politics, the education and training, and the industry development in these areas where they're in the majority. And of course, work with the men, but say we are going to be different. We're going to look out for the general welfare of all the constituents and not take any malice towards the other minorities in the area, which are going to be Caucasians, Indians, Jews, Hispanics, and others. Get those folks involved. Just because you're in the majority, you don't exclude the minority.
Well, that's a new concept for Mississippi, because I think that we've excluded the minority since the time we were brought over here.
That is a fact.
And so it would be refreshing if your philosophy, if your thought process led to a kinder, more equitable style of governance. If we had a female in that position, that maybe that's a push that might grow some excitement. As you say, only 30% of the voting population is involved?
30%, and in some areas less than 30%. That 25 or 27 or 29% put the same people in office over and over, and usually it's whoever that current incumbent is the one that's going to get to office. He or she will have to do something majorly wrong to lose.
So,
in most states.
Are you saying that a female candidate would probably bring out more excitement and more people would come to the poll?
Of course.
You think that the city of Jackson will ever have a female mayor?
Oh, yeah, eventually, of course. That's going to happen. Now, it won't be anytime soon, but it's going to happen. And you're going to find there are going to be many female supervisors in the various counties in Mississippi and other areas. And one day you're going to have a female president of the United States. Now, that won't be anytime soon. I don't see any on the horizon right now that's running for the position, or they can be appointed to run later on. But this is happening. Everything has a season, as you know it. You've heard me say it many times. Everything's moved from right to left, and one day you're going to have a rise in female leadership. Again, you're going to have blacks ruling many areas in the United States. We have the documentation to show that blacks right now are in the majority of the South. 50% of the population control the 13 old Southern Confederate states and 6 additional states around the area that's attached to the Southern Confederate states. Right now, 50% of the population are blacks in that area.
Now, Doc, let's stop there for a moment, because I don't think many people are aware of that. Are you saying that blacks are in greater numbers in the South than Europeans?
In certain states.
When you say 50%, where are you referencing 50%?
I'm referencing, I have the study here. This was done by this is Pew Research, PEW Research, February 2023. And it says that regionally, the highest concentration of black people in the United States is in the South. More than half, 51% of the black people out of this 47.2 million live in the South. In many areas, you have blacks up to 90% in charge, population-wise, in the precincts, in some of the towns, some of the cities, some of the counties, regionally, but there is not one state yet that has what we call a majority black population. But many of them have 45%, 35%, and anywhere a black person is 25% of any area with good change and not reliance on the Democratic Party, they could determine who the leader is going to be.
Okay.
It's all about mathematics.
Okay, so what you're saying is that 56% of the total black population resides in the South.
In the South. That's right. That's
Okay,
a lot of
we
folks.
may not be 50% of the total population, but 50% of all black people live in the South.
That's right.
And so,
According to this study.
Okay. So states like Mississippi could be 45, 49% black.
That's right. And many of the areas in Mississippi has 85% black, 75%, especially in the Delta region. Now, those regions can control those areas if the blacks will organize and stop criticizing European whites and stop loving the Democrat Party so much and get them some viable candidates in the Republican Party, and then blacks go and vote with the Republicans for, up to 35% in certain areas where they're already in the majority.
Well, now, Doc, you state here in your fact sheet that there are 47.2 million blacks in the U.S. And now you were saying that 56% of that 47 million live in the South.
That's right. In the old Southern Confederate states, plus 5 other surrounding states where they have significant amounts of blacks in the majority, in various precincts, in various cities, in various towns. And majority means 51%.
Well, Doc, if you got, that's greater than 25 million blacks in those traditional 13 states in the South. That's greater than 25 million blacks. Why are blacks in the South living such a standard of living is so low when there's so many of them in the region? If you got 25 million of your kind in that concentrated area, you would think the South ought to be the mecca for black people.
Well, it ought to be, and it is, but we don't know it. And the people that know it not going to tell you about it. You think the current politicians going to be talking about that black or white? They're not going to do it. They are going to maintain the status quo as often and as long as they can because they love being in power. being a political appointee or an elected person is one of the best jobs in the world, because you get from 2 to 6 years in those positions in various areas without any major responsibility or oversight. All you have to do is be a citizen of the United States, live in that district for so many months, and be a non-felon. Now, you can even have misdemeanors against you, and you can win if you are off a certain age, some areas as young as 18, others 20, 21.
So is it possible to have a regional concept with blacks, like where we abandon state lines and we say that it's 25 million here? Can back the Pan-African Summit was called. Is it possible to bring 25 million blacks? It's not hard to travel from Texas to Virginia. I mean, we don't have to travel that far to come to get together, not like they had to go to Africa or somewhere. Is it possible to bring that 25 million people into a philosophy, an economic survival philosophy?
It can happen. It has happened. Marcus Garvey had 5 or 6 million black folks in his organization from all over the United States, in the Caribbean area, in London and other places. You have Martin Luther King and his group. The various civil rights organizations control millions of blacks in America, specifically in the South. They were the leaders there, but they were being manipulated by the human enemies of mankind. I call them outside groups. That's who were financing them. So the people that finance you determine your destiny. The simple change is to recuse yourself from the outside agitators, fund your own leaders, pool your own resources and your talents, and build coalitions then with others. We call them new entities, and then show yourself that it's time for a change, and this will happen this way. You have to make those decisions. You don't allow people to finance your campaign and appoint your leaders or designate the leaders and say, if you don't pull this man or this woman into your circle, we're not going to pay for it. Tell them to keep that money. Train your own folks, put in positions of leadership after you train them well. Give them some internships, give them some assistantships, allow them to be on boards and commissions and agencies on the local and the state level, and they will train themselves, and they can be the new leaders in the South.
Well, I'm tremendously excited about what you're saying. I know it's difficult for us to rally blacks in Mississippi or blacks in Jackson. I know it's difficult, and I know you say that we can do it in six years left to do it by training new leadership. I get that. But tonight you're saying that it's 25 million of us in these 13 states that maybe we ought to have some access to try to build a coalition so we can set forth an example.
That's a fact. That's right. First of all, you build coalition with yourself, with your own people. And then you look at the peripheral, so-called others. Look where they live, where they are dominant in the population, because with all the racism and classism we have in America, every major group in America has its own location. Now, they're a little spattering here and there, but if you want to find most of the blacks, you go to what is designated as the black area. If you want to find most of the Hispanics, you go to Hispanic areas, you're going to find them. You want to find where most of the Jews live in America, there are certain enclaves you can go in, Polish, Italians, and others. And all you have to do is look at those numbers, form coalitions, and give them some of the crumbs, and you, as a majority, get to positions of leadership and responsibility and hire your own people and make change on the local, state, and regional level. And this can be done with just some planning, but you have to train your own people. You can't depend on the current leadership to do it, nor even to tell you about it, and they are not going to participate with you in this matter.
So how do we approach blacks in Louisiana and blacks in Mississippi? They say that we're going to have a Mississippi-Louisiana summit.
Well, that's very simple. They do it every day. If you want to have a big regional football game, you just start talking about it on social media. They're going to show up.
Wow.
If you want to have a major rapper to come into your area and going to be at the Jackson Coliseum, you talk about it 2 weeks on social media, they be coming from Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, everywhere. And if
are you saying it's just, it could be done like the Million Man March?
Of course. But it'd be more organized than the Million Man March. See, you had a small group that was calling the shots in the Million Man March, which the federal government dictated how long they could stay in town. They told those boys, say, you can get here early, but you got to leave early. Can't stay overnight. That's what they told them. And they gave them enough money to rent buses and had union officials and churches and others paid off to use their buses and so forth. And they got those Negroes up there and a few whites in Washington. They stayed around there and ate fried chicken, enjoyed speeches, and got on that bus and got out of Dodge around dusk dark.
But they came.
That's right.
And the invitation was extended, as you say, I don't know how busy social media was back then, but some kind of way they got the word. And they showed up. And if we could have an event like that with just Mississippi and Louisiana.
And Georgia, always like that tripart type situation.
You want to throw
That's
Georgia in? There's
That's
a
right.
young lady over there, Stacey Abrams, that is gaining some popularity in terms of unifying black people.
She is going to be a big, major political winner within the next 10 years if she chooses to do so. She's going to surprise a lot of people. Now, she might not be in the House or the Senate, but she's going to have a major state or national position in leadership if she chooses. And they're going to be available. That's going to be available for a lot of other black people that's working hard right now. We call Stacey Abrams and others the new emerging leaders. You need more people like that. Mm-hmm. Now, they're going to lose often early. Mm-hmm. But if they stay on the fight or in the fight, they're going to start getting those appointments and those votes that they need to be in those positions. Because most of those leaders are in their 30s to 55 years of age. And that's the new group we need.
Well, I give you the Georgia. You brought Georgia in, and Miss Abrams is an example of someone that has just kind of fished the mold of what you've been talking about. But I don't identify that person in Louisiana nor Mississippi.
Well, there are some in Mississippi and in Louisiana that you can find, and all you have to do is do the research out of people that is not currently in office. There are a lot of candidates that's been running for various positions knowing they're going to lose, and they are just waiting for the time for people to get organized, pool their resources, and some of these people going to start surprising people like Mr. Simmons, like Mr. Stamps, and there are going to be other regional leaders in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, if they manipulate the vote. And of course, the people in power are going to do everything they can to unstabilize these elections, commit all kinds of illegal activities to change the vote, because they're going to try to recount them and refine some that's allegedly been lost. You see, and that's what they're supposed to do. Their job is to stay in office, and the other job is to keep you out. Therefore, your job is to move them out and you get in. So that's the way it goes. That's why they have accuse them of malfeasance in office, stealing votes and paying off people and all kind of things.
Would you agree to be a speaker if such a conference could be put together?
Most certainly. I most certainly will.
Because
I've been speaking on this matter for 30 years. It takes a long time to get anything done. And there's some movement going on that I'm not going to talk about on this show. Gradually things are changing with new leadership. They are forming coalitions. They are pooling their resources. Some even are supporting Republicans that are Democrats to get a position of responsibility, to get appointed to various commissions. Now, I hope they are smart enough to do like the Republicans. Republicans look at people that have already declared themselves to be Democrats. They see that they can strategically put them in office by allowing them to run as a Democrat, giving them all the money they need, help them win, and then 2 weeks later, they declare themselves a Republican. Some of the blacks are running as independents. Some are running as Democrats, knowing they're not Democrats. But if they would announce that they are Republicans, they wouldn't win. So the safest thing for a black person to do now in an area where there's a majority black is to run as an independent versus being a Democrat, even if he is leaning towards the Republican Party.
Well, we had a young lady that supported a Republican governor, Miss Angela Cockerham, down out of Magnolia, and that's a real difficult thing to do. I mean, her strategy there, I'm sure that blacks should have some access to the government, and quite frankly, I'd love to get her on the show, but you know, it takes a lot of courage for her to step out there and support a Republican in this black democratic city.
Well, that's what you have to do, sir. You have to have that courage to do so. Go against the grain. Now, she has a reason for doing that. I don't know the reason, but I do know one thing. She didn't think of this on her own. Someone approached her about this and told her how it would be an advantage for her and possibly her people. And she looked at those comments, listened to those people that she had respect for, and looked at the opportunity, which not going to be exposed, what she was promised, and it happened. And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Well, I congratulate her on having that kind of courage, because I know that it's difficult. But now, you know, I'm curious. You brought up Marcus Garvey and his method and what he was trying to do. And we're talking now about 50-some% of all blacks live in this little corridor, which is interesting. And now you and I are talking about those blacks in that corridor ought to have some agenda, collective agenda that they support.
That's right. But not with the current elected and appointed officials in politics, in religion, and in the industry. You don't get those people involved in your area when you're getting ready to create that new man. You let them lay on the side and finance the organization and serve as advisors, because most of those people have to be convinced that you have been in power long enough. We have supported you financially. Now you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. You have your house paid for. Your kids have been given scholarships to go to college. Your daughter and son had married the right person. And you have those 2 grandchildren that you want. And of course, it's time for you to step aside and help us. And you have to go to these people individually and talk to them. Like they did this lady you just mentioned, Miss Cochran, you call her?
Yeah.
That's where you have to talk to people.
And you make me think of the biblical terms when the promised land, everybody didn't get to the promised land. They couldn't go there until the old heads died out. You're saying that the current elected officials can't be in leadership role in this new coalition.
No, they cannot. That is not wise. Even God knows that. It's not wise. You don't put those old politicians that's been brainwashed and trained by the human enemies of mankind, where they teach them to look out for self first and me second. Self-economic gain, self-political gain, but not the gain for your people. I will dictate to you what to do. You represent my interests, and just let black folks know that you have a black leader, and I'm it. That's what you find in America today. The same thing, matter of fact, it's even worse than that in Africa, in those 55 different nations in Africa. And with all of those resources in Africa, in the Caribbean, and other areas, all of those areas can be dominated by black people with the support of other groups in those areas, and not the blacks be at the bottom of the barrel economically, socially, politically, and religiously. When you don't have the ability to make decisions on how your resources are going to be spent, how your infrastructure is going to be shared, the results of your minerals and so forth, what education opportunity is going to be available for your people, and how they want to be involved in decision-making possibility by being allowed to join groups that's going to train them to become interns and get on commissions and boards. If you do that, you will gradually create leaders, and they don't even know they're being created. But you have to strategically recruit those people, put them in office through assignments as interns on boards of directors, as agency heads, on this commission, on this group that you're putting together to come up with a new economic initiative. You don't get no politicians that's been in office 2 or 3 terms to be on your new economic development commission.
Wow. So what do we do with our ministers?
Well, the ministers, I can't even tell you publicly what we ought to do to the ministers, but I would just briefly tell you, a lot of the ministers are as bad as the politicians. They don't want to relinquish their power. Most of them don't even have a succession plan. Many of them preach too long. They need to train younger people, males or females, to take over leadership and step down while they're in good health, and have the church and others to put them on a nice retirement plan, make sure they have a nice home that's paid for, give them proper insurance, and let them serve at the church in their special office as an advisor to the new minister, whether it's male or female. And then this new group will put an economic plan together for the church, a political plan together to train their people, their young members, and put them in positions of responsibility in the church first, and then positions of responsibility in community organizations, on agencies and commissions in the city and county area when they are 18 to 35. And those people are automatically being trained because they know the rules and regulations of these boards and agencies. They know the function of the counties, the cities, and the towns. And those young people will be able to take over without study, for instance.
Doc, you're really giving some hard-well things to think about. I'm sitting here listening to you, and this diaspora that we have here that you've identified, and the economic needs that you've identified, and the removal of the obstacles in terms of preachers and politicians, and bringing forth new leaderships like Stacey Abrams, etc. I can see how that could become a movement.
It can become a movement, and it is a movement, but I told you there are certain things I'm not going to say. But the thing is, you have to go and approach these current leaders, I like to call them incumbents, one by one. First, if you're looking at the preaching community, you start on the denominational level. You don't worry about that local preacher. You get to him later. You have to go and work with the head of the snake and give him an opportunity to look at both sides of the issue, and then tell him or her what can happen to you if you don't submit to a change. We need you to support us by appointing this person as a member of your agency, of your commission. Put this new young engineer that we have sent to school on a scholarship as a operation manager of all these churches you have. get this young attorney that we have trained in your church to be the denominational attorney instead of the big law firm downtown that you have had during your administration. On and on and on. You have to start at the top, and then you go, when you get the top in order, you start then on the precinct level. You start at the top and go down to the basement, down to the foundation, and work up.
Mm.
You first have to hit the head of the snake to get attention so the tail won't whip around and kill you.
I'm reminded as a boy when my daddy would be plowing and the old mule wouldn't act right, and he'd pick up something and he'd hit him right between the ears.
Got his attention every time.
Got his attention every time.
That's right.
He did a lot better right after that.
That's fact. It still worked. It works with animals and it worked with human beings. My dad has a new dog, and this dog, true story, this dog been eating up chairs on the outside, tearing down things, jumping up on the wall and chewing things. And my dad has a real good policy. He calls the dog, points between his legs, say, "Get there, boy. Sit there, boy." He talks to the dog, and he give him a good switching and tell him what I don't want you to do. If he tow up the chair, he pulls that cloth off that the dog chewed off, put it in his mouth, and then whip him.
Wow.
And that's not happening now
Why does he put the cloth in his mouth?
because that's what he destroyed. He tore up the chair. He tore up the bench, ate the cloth out of the chair.
So you're saying that if you didn't put the cloth in his mouth and whipped him, he might not know what he was.
That's right. Because humans are smarter than dogs. So if you tell an incumbent, "We've been good to you, sir or ma'am. We've put you in office for the last 15, 20, 30 years. You are very prosperous. When we put you in this position, you were broke, you know that. Now you are rich, or you are upper middle class. All your family members that's close to you are doing well. They have good positions. And now it's time for a change. You don't go in fussing with people like that. You have your statistical data there to show and say, this is how we're going to help you gracefully get out of this area in this political position or this church position or this industrial position. And we want to help you because we value what you have done. Therefore, we need your advice."
Wow. I get it. I get it. I don't want to be whipped, and I don't know why I'm being whipped. So that doesn't do you any good. That confuses a person more. And so I get that.
Verbally whipping.
Yeah, I get that.
Yes, showing the statistics on what we have done for you, that you're in an excellent position. You are a trained leader. We need your advice, but you got to step down to get it because the advice we're getting from you now is not helping anybody but you and the people that's financing your position.
So this new coin word here that is coming to me is the diaspornomics. And that says that black folk ought to have something that they're building just themselves.
That's right.
The creation of a new Tuskegee or a new Fisk University. Now, I'm sure that it had white support. I'm certain that, and I'm sure that white support.
All of them had white support.
Would come into this as well. But black folk ought to take the lead.
That's the difference. They got to take the lead no matter where your support coming from. If one is going to offer you support and then going to name your leader,
yeah,
you better be cautious and you better start running.
Yeah.
You can let someone support you, but don't allow them to determine your destiny from birth to death. You say, I can take your money, but I make the decisions in these categories. Or, I don't need it because I have already pooled my resources and talents. I have my coalitions already made without you. Since I want to include you, you can help us.
Wow.
But you can't control me anymore.
Wow. So it's no more difficult than that I see they have a football game, and they bring Mississippi and Alabama athletes to play against Louisiana and Texas athletes, and they have that bowl every year. They bring all of that talent into one event, and it is no difference than being able to do that, to bring an economic summit into that environment.
That's right. It can easily be done, and other people are doing that.
Wow.
Those conservatives are doing it. The Democrats are doing it for their chosen few, but they don't have the independence to make the right decision. Look at all the black Democrats, for instance, that are mayors in big cities with majority populations. They are the worst managed entities in the country because they do not control their decision making. They do not control the finances that are generated in the community because someone else paid for them to get elected through their contribution. The black people didn't support the NAACP. They didn't support the Urban League. They didn't support the black colleges. Don't even do that today. If it wasn't for the few dollars the state would give black college or university, and that money that those presidents generate through grants and other funders and donors, the black colleges would have long disappeared if you depended on the state to support them.
Doc, with the engineers giving us the signal, I have learned a lot this evening, and I look forward to continuing.
Well, this is just part one. This is a part 4 paper that we are addressing, because next week, matter of fact, on Thursday, I'm going to do part 2 from, I believe it's from 5 to 6. And then on Friday, we might do part 3 or whenever you choose to do so.
That'll be fine.
Because these strategies are nothing new. They've always been done somewhere, but they just were not done by black folks. And then the last thing, as I conclude, is when you start coming up with new strategies, you have to watch out for your opponents, because they are going to do everything they can, ladies and gentlemen, to put you in a position where you're going to be compromised. And that's why you have to learn to not be compromised. And if you take folks' money, you don't have to worry about that. Think about it. So, Mr. Socrates, I'm going to end by saying, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for listening to Organize, Don't Criticize, Part 1, and we'll do Part 2, 3, 4 later on. Call us, 601-201-1957, or you can call us at 1-800-492-5186, and Doc and Sock will come to your home, your school, your community, or your church and give you the real news and tell you how you can change your status in your community where you are in the majority in 30, 60, or 90 days. Guaranteed. That's it. Stay tuned.